the ship Aurora Dawn dropped out of hyperspace above a red planet. Dr. Lisa Martinez pressed her face against the viewing port and watched the world spin below. 3 years of travel had brought them here to meet the Vrakthan, and her stomach felt tight with worry. "First time seeing Kethvar?" Captain Jake Sullivan asked as he walked up beside her. "Yes, sir. It looks hot," Jake laughed. "Wait until you step outside. The computer says it's 120 degrees in the shade." Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead, even though the ship's air was cool. She had studied every file about the Vrakthan for months. They were big. They were fast. They had claws that could cut through metal and teeth that could crush bone. Most important, they were smart. Smart enough to build cities and ships. Smart enough to contact Earth when human ships first entered their space. "You ready for this, Doc?" Jake asked. "As ready as anyone can be to meet 8-foot-tall predators." "They asked for you specifically. Your work with animal behavior impressed them." Lisa nodded, but her hands shook as she gathered her equipment. The Vrakthan had agreed to let humans land on their world, but only a small team. 5 humans total. Lisa would study their young while the others handled politics and trade talks. The landing shuttle bucked and shook as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the small window, Lisa saw a landscape of red rocks and black sand. No trees, no grass. Just stone and heat rising in waves. The shuttle touched down at the edge of a Vrakthan settlement. Lisa grabbed her gear and followed Jake to the exit ramp. The door opened and heat hit her like a physical blow. The air burned her lungs with each breath. "Stay calm," Jake whispered. "Remember, no sudden moves." 3 shapes waited for them in the distance. As they got closer, Lisa saw her first living Vrakthan. They were everything the files had described and worse. 8 feet tall with thick arms and legs covered in black scales. Their heads were long and narrow with rows of sharp teeth visible even when their mouths were closed. Yellow eyes tracked every movement the humans made. The largest Vrakthan stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. "I am High Huntress Zaraketh. You are the humans." "Yes," Jake replied through his translator device. "I am Captain Sullivan. This is Dr. Martinez." Zaraketh looked at Lisa for a long moment. Her yellow eyes moved from Lisa's face down to her equipment and back up again. "You are small," the huntress said. "Yes," Lisa replied. She fought to keep her voice steady. "You study cubs. I study behavior, how young learn and grow." Zaraketh made a sound that might have been laughter or a threat. "Our cubs are not like human cubs. They have claws, they have teeth. They hunt before they can walk properly." "I understand the risks." "Do you?" The huntress stepped closer. Lisa smelled something like burning metal and old blood. "Our cubs killed a rockhound last week, 3 of them working together. The rockhound was the size of your captain." Lisa swallowed hard but held her ground. "I've worked with dangerous animals before. I know how to be careful." The huntress stared at her for another long moment, then made a gesture with one clawed hand. "Come. I will show you where you may set up your watching place." They walked through the settlement. Lisa saw Vrakthan adults moving between buildings carved from solid rock. Some carried tools. Others carried what looked like weapons. All of them stopped to stare at the humans. Lisa heard low growls and clicking sounds that her translator couldn't interpret. The cubs were playing in a large open area surrounded by high stone walls. Lisa counted 12 of them, each about the size of a large dog but already showing the lean muscle and sharp claws of their parents. They wrestled and chased each other across the red sand, their movements quick and fluid. "They practice hunting," Zaraketh explained. "Even play is preparation for survival." Lisa watched as 2 cubs tackled a third. Their claws were out, but they seemed to know how much pressure to use. The tackled cub rolled free and immediately pounced on one of his attackers. "You may set up your equipment there," the huntress pointed to a shaded area near the wall. "Do not enter the cubs' space. Do not feed them. Do not touch them. Watch only." "Understood." Jake and the other humans left to continue their meetings with the adult Vrakthan. Lisa was alone with her equipment and 12 baby predators who could probably kill her without much effort. She unpacked her recording devices and set up her small shelter. The shade helped, but the heat was still crushing. She arranged her sleeping area with care, placing her blue travel pillow at the head of her bedroll. The pillow was old and worn from years of use on different worlds. It was the only thing that helped her sleep in strange places. The cubs noticed her immediately. 3 of them came to the edge of their play area and sat watching her. They tilted their heads like curious dogs, but their yellow eyes held intelligence that was definitely not canine. Lisa activated her recording equipment and began taking notes. The cubs moved in complex patterns. They had rules for their games that she didn't understand yet. When one cub dominated too much, the others would team up against it until balance returned. As the day grew hotter, most of the cubs found shaded spots against the walls and settled down to rest. Lisa did the same, stretching out on her bedroll with her head on the familiar pillow. She dozed in the heat. Her recording device is still running. Through half-closed eyes, she watched the cubs. They watched her back with the same intensity. When evening came and the temperature dropped below 100 degrees, the cubs resumed their games. Lisa sat up and continued her observations. She didn't notice that 3 cubs had crept closer to the wall near her shelter. She didn't see them sniffing the air or following the trail of her scent. Night fell quickly on Kethvar. Lisa ate a cold meal from her supplies and prepared for sleep. The cubs had been called away by adult Vrakthan, leaving the play area empty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The cubs would get used to her presence. She would begin to understand their behavior patterns. With luck, she might even gain their trust enough to observe them more closely. Lisa settled onto her bedroll and rested her head on the blue pillow. Above her, alien stars filled a purple sky. In the distance, she could hear the adult Vrakthan moving through their settlement, their claws clicking against stone. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, unaware that her simple pillow was about to change everything between humans and Vrakthan forever. Lisa woke at dawn to the sound of claws scratching against stone. 3 young Vrakthan stood at the edge of the play area, staring directly at her shelter. They were smaller than the others, probably the youngest in the group. She sat up slowly, not wanting to startle them. The cubs tilted their heads in unison, watching her every movement. Their yellow eyes were bright with curiosity. "Good morning," she whispered, knowing they couldn't understand but hoping her tone would be clear. The largest of the 3 cubs took a step closer to the wall. Lisa could see the intelligence in its eyes, the way it studied her face and hands. This one had a scar on its left shoulder, probably from play fighting with the others. Lisa decided to call him Score. The smallest cub, who kept ducking behind the others, she named Thera. The third one, with unusually bright scales, became Nex. She went through her morning routine while they watched. Every movement seemed to fascinate them. When she brushed her teeth, Score crept closer to the wall. When she combed her hair, all 3 cubs sat down like they were settling in for a show. The other cubs arrived as the sun climbed higher. They immediately noticed the 3 watchers and began growling and clicking at them. Lisa couldn't understand the sounds, but the body language was clear. The older cubs wanted the younger ones to stop being interested in the human. Score growled back. The sound was high-pitched, not yet the deep rumble of an adult Vrakthan. He held his ground while Thera and Nex backed away. An adult Vrakthan appeared at the entrance to the play area. Lisa recognized him as one of the guards who had been present during yesterday's introductions. He made a sharp barking sound and all the cubs immediately moved away from the wall. But throughout the day, Lisa noticed the 3 young ones kept glancing in her direction. When the others were busy with their games, Score would drift toward her side of the area. Thara would peek around older cubs to get a look at the human. Nex would stop whatever he was doing when Lisa moved or made a sound. Lisa began to understand the social structure. The older cubs dominated through size and aggression. They controlled the best shaded spots and got first choice of the small animals that the adults brought for them to practice hunting on. The younger cubs had to wait their turn for everything, but they were also more curious. While the older cubs dismissed Lisa as uninteresting after the first day, the 3 youngest couldn't stop watching her. Lisa made notes on her tablet. The cubs played fighting games that were clearly preparing them for real combat. They practiced stalking, pouncing, and working in groups to bring down imaginary prey. Even their games had complex rules about dominance and submission. What surprised her was how gentle they could be with each other. When one cub got hurt during play, the others would back off immediately. They groomed each other's scales and shared food without fighting. The aggression was controlled, purposeful. As the morning grew hotter, Lisa set up a shade screen near her equipment. The cubs watched this process with intense interest. Score actually pressed against the wall, trying to get as close as possible to see what she was doing. "It's just fabric," Lisa said to him, "to block the sun." Score tilted his head at the sound of her voice. He made a soft clicking noise that didn't sound aggressive at all. By midday, the temperature reached 130 degrees. Even in the shade, the heat was crushing. The cubs had all retreated to the coolest parts of their area and lay panting against the stone walls. Lisa felt dizzy from the heat, despite drinking water constantly. Her head pounded and sweat soaked through her clothes. She looked at her bedroll in the shade and made a decision. She stretched out on the thin mattress and put her head on the blue pillow. The familiar comfort helped her relax despite the alien environment. Within minutes, exhaustion from the heat pulled her into sleep. She dreamed of cooler places, earth forests with green trees and flowing water, the research station on Europa, where she had studied ice-adapted creatures in sub-zero temperatures. Anywhere but this burning world of rock and sand. Something woke her, a sound like careful breathing very close to her face. Lisa opened her eyes slowly and froze. Score stood just outside her shelter. He had somehow crossed the play area and climbed over the wall without making enough noise to wake her. His yellow eyes were fixed on her pillow. The young Vrakthan was close enough that Lisa could feel heat from his body. His nostrils moved as he tested the air around her sleeping area. He seemed particularly interested in the pillow itself, leaning forward to sniff at the blue fabric. Lisa held perfectly still. One wrong move could trigger his hunting instincts. Cubs might be smaller than adults, but Score still had claws and teeth that could do serious damage. Score took another step closer. His head was now directly above the pillow. He breathed in deeply, his eyes closing as he processed whatever sense he was finding. Very slowly, Lisa shifted to one side of her bedroll. She moved inch by inch, trying not to startle the cub. Score opened his eyes and watched her, but didn't back away. When Lisa had moved far enough aside, Score did something completely unexpected. He lowered himself down next to the pillow and touched it with one claw. The fabric compressed under the pressure. His eyes went wide with surprise. Nothing in the Vrakthan world was soft. Everything was stone and metal and the hard scales of their own bodies. The concept of something yielding and comfortable was completely foreign to them. Score pressed harder, watching the pillow deform and spring back. He made a low sound that might have been wonder or confusion. From across the play area, Nex and Thera had noticed their friend's absence. They were making distressed clicking sounds and looking around frantically. Soon the older cubs would notice too. Lisa sat up very slowly. "You should go back," she whispered. Score looked at her face, then back at the pillow. He seemed torn between curiosity and the knowledge that he wasn't supposed to be there. The decision was made for him when an adult Vrakthan voice barked from the play area entrance. All three young cubs immediately froze. Then Score scrambled back over the wall with surprising speed. Lisa watched as the adult guard counted the cubs and lectured them in their own language. The three youngest kept their heads down, but she caught Score glancing back at her shelter several times. That evening, Lisa made more notes. The cubs were more curious about human objects than the adults had predicted. They were also capable of individual decision-making, even when it went against group behavior. Most important, Score had shown no aggression during his close encounter with her. He had been careful not to damage her equipment or hurt her. The cub had intelligence and self-control beyond what anyone expected. As night fell and Lisa prepared for sleep again, she noticed all three young cubs positioned where they could see her shelter. They lay at the edge of the play area, pretending to rest but actually watching her every move. Lisa arranged her bedroll and placed the pillow at the head. She didn't know it yet, But that simple blue cushion had already changed something fundamental in the minds of three young predators. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries. The cubs would find ways to get closer, and Lisa would begin to understand that sometimes the smallest things could bridge the gap between entirely different worlds. The next morning brought the same crushing heat, but Lisa noticed a change in the three young cubs. They positioned themselves closer to her side of the wall and seemed more focused on her activities than their own games. Lisa went about her routine, recording the behavior patterns of all 12 cubs. The older ones continued their hunting practice and dominance displays. But Score, Nex, and Thera kept finding reasons to drift toward her location. By noon, the temperature was unbearable again. Lisa felt the familiar dizziness and headache that came with extreme heat. She looked longingly at her shaded bedroll. This time, she made sure to move her equipment first. Her tablet and recording devices went to the far side of her shelter. If any cubs decided to investigate again, she didn't want them damaging her work. Lisa lay down and rested her head on the blue pillow. The fabric was warm from the heat, but still softer than anything else in this world of stone and metal. She closed her eyes and tried to find sleep despite the temperature. Again, something woke her. But this time it wasn't breathing. It was the absence of sound. The play area had gone quiet. Lisa opened her eyes to find Score standing beside her bedroll. But he wasn't looking at her. His entire attention was focused on the pillow. Very carefully, Lisa rolled to one side. Score watched her move but showed no sign of aggression or fear. When she was clear of the bedroll, he stepped forward. The young Vrak then lowered his head and sniffed the pillow thoroughly. His nostrils flared as he took in the human scent that had soaked into the fabric. Then he did something that made Lisa hold her breath. Score lay down on the pillow. His body was too large for the small cushion, but he managed to rest his head and part of his neck on the soft surface. Immediately, his whole posture changed. The tension in his muscles relaxed. His breathing became deeper and more regular. For several minutes, Score simply lay there with his eyes closed. Lisa had never seen a Vrakthan look so peaceful. Everything about their species spoke of constant alertness and readiness for danger. But Score looked almost content. A soft clicking sound came from the play area. Nex had noticed his friend's absence and was calling to him. Score opened his eyes but didn't move from the pillow. Thera appeared at the wall, having climbed up to see where Score had gone. Her yellow eyes went wide when she saw him lying on the strange, soft object. She made questioning sounds that Score answered with quiet clicks. Lisa watched in fascination as some kind of communication passed between the three cubs. Thara disappeared from the wall, then returned with Nex. Both of them stared at Score on the pillow with obvious curiosity. From her ship in orbit, Chris Parker monitored the situation through long-range sensors. He had been tracking Lisa's vital signs and the movements of the cubs around her location. The readings showed something unusual happening. "Captain Sullivan," Chris called over the comm system, "you need to see this data from the surface." Jake arrived at the sensor station to find Chris pointing at his screens. The cubs' stress indicators have dropped significantly in the last hour. All three of the young ones show patterns consistent with deep relaxation. Is Lisa in danger? No, sir. Her readings are normal. She's awake and alert. But something down there has changed the cub's behavior completely. Back on the surface, Lisa watched as Score finally lifted his head from the pillow. He moved slowly, like someone waking from a good sleep. But instead of leaving, he settled down next to the bedroll and made a series of soft sounds toward the wall. Nex was the first to respond. The bright-scaled cub scrambled over the wall and approached the pillow with obvious caution. He sniffed it as Score had done, then looked at his friend with what could only be described as wonder. Score moved aside, clearly inviting Nex to try the pillow. The second cub lay down carefully, resting his head on the blue fabric. Within moments, his body relaxed in the same way Score's had. Thera was not going to be left out. She climbed over the wall and waited her turn with patient attention. When Nex finally moved aside, she took her place on the pillow with a soft sigh of contentment. Lisa realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. The cubs were sharing. Not food or territory or dominance, but comfort. They had established a rotation system without any apparent conflict or negotiation. Over the next hour, the three cubs took turns on the pillow. Each one would lie there for exactly the same amount of time before giving way to the next. They settled into a pattern that seemed almost ritualistic in its precision. The older cubs began to notice. Several of them came to investigate the missing younger ones. When they saw what was happening, their reactions ranged from confusion to disapproval. Sharp barking sounds came from the play area as the dominant cubs called for their juniors to return. But Score, Nex, and Thera ignored the calls. They had found something more important than social hierarchy. They had discovered comfort. Lisa made careful notes on her tablet. This behavior was completely outside everything known about Vrakthan society. They were a species focused on survival and strength. Comfort was not a concept that appeared in any of their cultural files. As the afternoon wore on, Lisa realized she needed to move around her shelter. Her equipment required adjustment, and she wanted to record the cubs' behavior from different angles. But when she approached her bedroll, all three cubs looked at her with unmistakable distress. They didn't growl or show aggression. Instead, they made soft whimpering sounds that reminded Lisa of young animals separated from their mothers. The idea of losing the pillow clearly caused them genuine anxiety. Lisa looked at the blue cushion that had traveled with her to dozens of worlds. It was worn and faded, filled with cheap foam that had compressed over years of use. But to three young predators on an alien world, it had become something precious. She made a decision that would change everything. "Keep it," Lisa said softly. "It's yours now." The cubs didn't understand her words, but her actions were clear. Lisa moved her equipment to a different part of the shelter and set up her sleeping area without the pillow. She would make do with a folded blanket. The relief in the three young Vrakthan was obvious. They resumed their careful rotation, but now with even more attention to ritual. Each cub would approach the pillow with slow, respectful movements. They would settle onto it with visible gratitude. And when their turn ended, they would move aside with reluctance but acceptance. By evening, other cubs had begun to watch the process. They didn't approach or try to join, but their attention was focused on the strange ceremony taking place near the humans' shelter. That night, as Lisa tried to sleep on her folded blanket, she could hear soft movement outside. The three cubs had not returned to the play area. They had arranged themselves around the pillow, in a protective circle, taking turns throughout the night. Chris Parker's sensors recorded unprecedented data. The stress hormones in all three cubs had dropped to levels never seen in young Vrakthan. Their brain activity showed patterns associated with deep contentment and security. "Captain," Chris reported, "I think we're witnessing the birth of something new in their culture. These cubs are creating their own ritual around a human object." Jake studied the data with growing amazement. One pillow? One pillow. But the implications could be huge. If comfort objects can have this effect on their young, it might change how we understand their entire society. Lisa lay awake listening to the quiet sounds of the cubs sharing their treasure. She had come to Kethvar to study alien behavior. Instead, she might have accidentally introduced an entirely new concept to their civilization. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The adult Vrakthan would notice the change in the cubs' behavior. Questions would be asked. But for now, three young predators slept peacefully around a simple blue pillow, having discovered that sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe was not strength or aggression, but simple comfort shared with friends. Lisa woke at dawn to find something unexpected around her former pillow. The three cubs had arranged small objects in a careful circle around the blue cushion. Smooth stones, interesting pieces of metal, and what looked like colorful mineral fragments formed a decorative border. Score was on the pillow, but he wasn't simply lying there as before. He held his body in a specific position, head raised slightly, claws tucked under him in a way that looked almost ceremonial. When his time was up, he rose slowly and moved aside with the same careful dignity. Nex approached next, but he didn't go directly to the pillow. Instead, he picked up a small red stone in his claws and placed it gently next to the others. Only then did he settle onto the cushion, arranging himself in exactly the same position Score had used. Lisa watched with growing amazement. What had started as simple comfort-seeking had evolved into something much more complex. The cubs were creating their own ritual around her pillow, complete with offerings and ceremonial behavior. Thara's turn came with even more elaborate preparation. She groomed her scales thoroughly before approaching, running her claws through them until they gleamed. She added a piece of shiny metal to the collection, then took her place on the pillow with slow, reverent movements. From her ship, Amy Foster reviewed the data Chris Parker had sent up from the surface. As the mission's anthropologist, she specialized in understanding alien cultures and behaviors. "This is remarkable," Amy told Captain Sullivan over the comlink. "The cubs appear to have never encountered anything that provided comfort without serving a survival purpose. Their entire world is built around function and necessity." Jake frowned at the data streams. "You're saying they don't understand the concept of comfort for its own sake?" "Exactly. Everything in Vrakthan society has a purpose. Shelter protects from heat and predators. Food provides energy. Weapons ensure survival. But this pillow serves no survival function at all. It only provides comfort, and that's completely foreign to them." Down on the surface, the ritual was attracting attention from the other cubs. The older ones approached the wall, separating the play area from Lisa's shelter. They made questioning clicks and growls at the three younger cubs, clearly demanding explanations. Score responded with a series of complex sounds that Lisa's translator couldn't interpret. Whatever he said seemed to frustrate the older cubs. They became more aggressive in their calls, but the three pillow guardians ignored them completely. An adult Vrakthan guard appeared at the entrance to the play area. He saw the situation immediately. Three cubs missing from the group, strange objects arranged around a human item, and clear disobedience to the social order. The guard barked sharp commands. All 12 cubs in the play area immediately dropped to the ground in submission. But Score, Nex, and Thara remained outside the wall, protecting their pillow. The guard's voice grew louder and more threatening. Lisa could see his claws extending as his frustration mounted. The three cubs were breaking fundamental rules about hierarchy and obedience. Lisa stood up slowly, knowing she might be making things worse but unable to watch the cubs get in trouble over her pillow. The guard noticed her movement and turned his attention to her. "Problem?" Lisa asked through her translator. The guard made a series of harsh sounds that the device interpreted as cubs, disobedient, dangerous behavior, human influence. Before Lisa could respond, another voice spoke from behind the guard. High Huntress Zaraketh had arrived, and she did not look pleased. "Dr. Martinez," the Huntress said, her deep voice carrying clear disapproval. "What have you done to our young? I don't understand. Look at them." Zaraketh gestured toward the three cubs, who had arranged themselves around the pillow in a protective formation. "They ignore commands. They abandon their training. They worship a human object." Lisa looked at Score, Nex, and Thara. Their postures were calm but determined. They weren't going to abandon their pillow, even facing the most powerful Vrakthan in the settlement. "They're not worshipping it," Lisa said carefully. "They've found comfort in it." Comfort? The translator struggled with the word, making several attempts before settling on a term that seemed to frustrate the Huntress. "What is this comfort?" Lisa realized she was facing a fundamental language barrier. How do you explain comfort to a species that has never experienced it? "It's something that makes you feel safe and peaceful," she began. "Not because it protects you from danger, but because it provides emotional security." Zaraketh's yellow eyes narrowed. "Emotional security is weakness. It makes hunters soft. These cubs should be learning to hunt and fight, not lying on human softness." "But look at them," Lisa pointed out. "Are they weaker, or are they calmer and more cooperative than before?" The Huntress studied the three cubs. It was true that they showed none of the aggressive posturing typical of young Vrakthan. They weren't fighting each other for dominance or competing for the guard's attention. They simply maintained their vigil around the pillow with quiet determination. From the ship, Ben Rodriguez had been monitoring the psychological profiles of all the cubs. As the mission's psychologist, he tracked stress levels, social behaviors, and emotional development patterns. "Captain," Ben reported. The data is incredible. The three cubs participating in the pillow ritual show unprecedented levels of cooperation and emotional stability. Their stress hormones have dropped 40% below normal levels for their age group. What does that mean in practical terms? Jake asked. It means they're happier, calmer, and more willing to work together than any young Vrakthen we've ever observed. Whatever this comfort object is doing, it's having a positive effect on their mental development. On the surface, Zaraketh continued to study the cubs. She walked closer to their formation, testing whether they would break their protective stance. They didn't. All three remained focused on their pillow with unwavering dedication. In our culture, the huntress said slowly, young cubs compete for everything. Food, position, territory. They fight constantly to establish dominance. These three have stopped fighting completely. Is that bad? Lisa asked. I do not know. The admission clearly troubled Zaraketh. They are calmer than other cubs. They work together instead of competing. But they also ignore commands from their elders. Lisa took a careful step closer to the huntress. On my world, we believe that emotional comfort makes individuals stronger, not weaker. When a person feels secure and valued, they can take greater risks and endure harder challenges. Your species is weak, Zaraketh replied automatically, but there was less conviction in her voice than before. Yet we traveled between stars to meet you. We survived in your desert heat. We're willing to risk our lives to learn about your people. Does that seem weak? The huntress was quiet for a long moment, watching as Thera carefully groomed her scales before taking her turn on the pillow. The ritual had evolved further. Each cub now spent time preparing themselves before approaching their comfort object. I will observe, Zaraketh announced finally. If these cubs become weak or unable to survive, I will end this behavior immediately. But if they remain strong while gaining this comfort, then perhaps there is something to learn. Lisa felt relief wash over her. The cubs would be allowed to keep their ritual, at least for now. As the day progressed, more adult Vrakhthen came to observe the unusual behavior. Some showed disapproval, but others seemed curious about the cubs' obvious contentment. The three young ones continued their rotation, adding new objects to their offering circle and maintaining their careful ceremonies. By evening, Lisa realized that something fundamental was changing in the Vrakhthen settlement. The simple blue pillow had introduced a concept that didn't exist in their culture before. The idea that comfort itself could have value, that peace and security were not signs of weakness but sources of strength. Tomorrow would bring new developments. But tonight, three young predators settled around their treasure, taking turns sharing something their species had never known before: comfort for its own sake. 3 weeks had passed since the pillow ritual began. Lisa sat in her shelter, making notes on the remarkable changes she had observed. The three cubs had not only maintained their ceremonies but expanded them into something approaching religious devotion. Each morning, they would clean the area around the pillow with careful attention. They arranged their offerings in specific patterns that seemed to have meaning only to them. Most interesting, they had begun teaching their ritual to younger cubs who showed interest. High Huntress Zaraketh arrived at Lisa's shelter as the sun reached its peak. The massive predator studied the pillow ceremony with the same intensity she might use to evaluate a hunting strategy. Your cubs show unusual behavior, she said without greeting. They're your cubs, Lisa corrected gently. I just provided the pillow. The other adults question my decision to allow this. They say I am making our young soft and weak. Lisa looked at Score, who was currently on the pillow. His posture was relaxed but alert. When a younger cub approached the offering circle, Score made gentle sounds that guided the newcomer through the proper procedures. Do they look weak to you? Lisa asked. Zaraketh made a sound that might have been consideration. No, they are calmer than other cubs. They work together better. They learn faster because they do not spend energy fighting each other. Then why do the other adults object? Because it is not our way. We survive through strength and aggression. Comfort is unknown to us. Lisa made a decision that would change the course of the entire cultural exchange. She walked to her equipment area and picked up a small box from her personal belongings. "This is mine," she said, opening the box to reveal a small, worn photograph. "It shows my family back on Earth. I carry it everywhere I go." Zaraketh leaned closer, studying the image with curiosity. "Why?" "Because when I look at it, I remember who I am and why I work so hard. It gives me strength to face dangerous situations like coming to your world." The huntress looked at the photo, then at Lisa, then back at the photo. "A comfort object. Yes, it doesn't make me weak. It makes me stronger because I know what I'm fighting for. The pillow works the same way for the cubs. It doesn't make them soft. It gives them emotional security that lets them be braver." Lisa put the photo away and sat cross-legged near the pillow. Score's time was up, and he moved aside to let Nex take his place. But as Nex approached the pillow, Lisa reached out and touched the blue fabric. All three cubs froze. Their eyes went wide with something like fear. They had never seen anyone else touch their sacred object. "This pillow has been with me for 10 years, Lisa said softly. "It has traveled to 17 different worlds. It was with me when I faced ice storms on Europa and acid rain on Kepler 442b. It helped me sleep through sandstorms on Mars and survive loneliness on research stations light years from home." She lifted the pillow gently, cradling it in her arms. The cubs made distressed sounds, but they didn't move to stop her. "When I hold it, I remember every place it has protected me, every dangerous mission where it gave me comfort, every night when I was afraid but fell asleep anyway because this simple object made me feel safe." Lisa placed the pillow back in its position. Immediately, the cubs relaxed. Nex resumed his approach and settled onto it with visible relief. "You see," Lisa said to Zaraketh, "comfort does not replace strength. It supports strength. It allows strength to grow." The huntress was quiet for a long moment, watching as Nex arranged himself on the pillow with the same careful ceremony the cubs always used. "I begin to understand," Zaraketh said finally. "The pillow does not make them dependent. It makes them secure enough to take risks." Over the following days, the experiment continued with even more support from the High Huntress. She ordered detailed observations of all the cubs, comparing those who participated in the pillow ritual with those who didn't. Kate Morrison, the mission's diplomatic attaché, received the reports from the surface with growing excitement. She immediately contacted Captain Sullivan. "Jake, this could be the breakthrough we've been hoping for. The cubs who use the comfort object show 20% better performance in learning tasks. They cooperate more effectively and show less aggressive behavior toward other cubs." "What are you thinking, Kate?" "I'm thinking this could be the foundation for deeper cultural exchange. If we can help the Vrakhthan understand the value of emotional security, it might change their entire approach to child rearing and social development." Back on the surface, the other cubs had begun to notice the obvious advantages enjoyed by the pillow group. Young Vrakhthan, who had previously shown aggression and competition, were now approaching Lisa with curious interest. One afternoon, a cub named Kresh brought Lisa a piece of fabric torn from old equipment. Through gestures and simple sounds, he made it clear that he wanted his own comfort object. Lisa looked at the rough material, then at the hopeful expression in the cub's yellow eyes. She smiled and helped him arrange the fabric into a small cushion. Within hours, Kresh had established his own ritual around the makeshift pillow. Two other cubs joined him, creating a second comfort circle in another part of the play area. The adult Vrakhthan watched these developments with a mixture of confusion and interest. Some remained disapproving, but others began asking Lisa questions about human child-rearing practices. As Lisa's time on Kethvar drew to a close, she faced a difficult decision about her pillow. The three cubs who had started the ritual showed clear distress whenever she approached it. They had claimed it as their own, and removing it would cause genuine psychological harm. On her final morning, Lisa made a formal presentation to High Huntress Zaraketh and the assembled adults of the settlement. "I gift this pillow to the cubs of Kethvar," she announced through her translator. "May it serve them as it has served me, not as a replacement for strength, but as a foundation for strength." The ceremony was simple but profound. Lisa placed her hands on the pillow one last time, then stepped back. Score, Nex, and Thera immediately surrounded their treasure, their relief and gratitude obvious in their postures. Zaraketh approached Lisa as the other adults dispersed. This gift will not be forgotten. The cubs who have learned from your pillow are stronger and wiser than cubs have ever been. We will preserve this object and its lessons. 6 months later, Lisa stood in the briefing room aboard the Aurora Dawn, addressing a gathering of diplomats and xenobiologists from across human space. The Pillow Protocol has proven successful in first contact situations with 12 different species, she reported. Simple comfort objects from human culture consistently serve as bridges for deeper understanding. Captain Sullivan smiled from the back of the room. The Vrakhthen have officially requested that all future human diplomatic missions include comfort objects as part of their standard gift packages. Lisa nodded. What we learned is that the desire for security and comfort appears to be universal. Species that have never experienced emotional comfort recognize its value once it's introduced. It doesn't make them weak. It makes them more willing to trust and cooperate. The implications spread far beyond Kethvar. Human missions to the crystal beings of Altair Prime carried soft blankets that became treasured objects in their rigid society. The warrior clans of Wolf 359 adopted stuffed animals that helped their young develop empathy alongside combat skills. 2 years after Lisa's return to Earth, she received a message from the Vrakhthen homeworld. The transmission included video footage of the original pillow, now carefully preserved in a place of honor within the settlement. The ritual had evolved far beyond what Lisa had witnessed. Hundreds of young Vrakhthen now participated in daily comfort ceremonies. The pillow itself was shared among cubs, according to a complex schedule that had become central to their social development. But the most remarkable change was in the adults. The generation of cubs who had learned the value of comfort were growing up to be more cooperative, more innovative, and more willing to consider new ideas than any Vrakhthen in recorded history. Lisa watched the footage and smiled. Her worn blue pillow, which had started as nothing more than a practical item for sleeping in strange places, had become the first human artifact to be considered sacred by an alien species. The final scene of the video showed 3 young Vrakhthen, not the original cubs, but their successors, carefully grooming themselves before approaching the pillow. They moved with the same reverence Skor, Nex, and Thera had shown, continuing a ritual that would likely persist for generations. In her report to the colonial administration, Lisa wrote, "We have learned that the most powerful diplomatic tools are often the simplest ones. A pillow, a photograph, a child's toy. These humble objects can communicate more about human values than any formal treaty. They show other species that strength and comfort are not opposites, but partners in building a better universe." The Pillow Protocol became standard practice for all human first contact missions. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, on worlds circling distant stars, alien children fell asleep on soft objects that carried within them the simple human truth that everyone, no matter how strong or fierce, needs comfort to truly thrive.